10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 395. Hey, everybody, welcome back to episode 395 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. We are going to continue our series on the great jazz standard, Have You Met Miss Jones? And I've decided, after sitting down and creating some of the materials for this, that this is going to be an extended series. We're going to actually do this for 2 months because there's lots of stuff to talk about on this tune, and there's lots of different ways to approach it. And I think that this tune is a great one to talk about a lot of different styles of playing and a lot of different options you have as an improvising musician in terms of how you can play over things. There's a big part of being an individual improviser is how are you going to approach tunes? I think you would agree with me that there's a million different ways to approach improvisation. And what I want to really dig into on this is a bunch of different ways that you can consider to find the one that you like the best and the one that gets the best results for you and the one that works the best with the way you perceive music. So that's kind of my goal here. I know it's like some big lofty goals, but I also think that it's very worthwhile to talk about it this way. So last week I had you learn the melody. Hopefully you've all done that. You've got that underneath your fingers, in your ears, in your brain, all that good stuff. Now, what we're going to do this week is we're going to talk about the first way to think about and play over the A section, right? So we talked about the fact that this tune is like A, B, A. But the thing about it is at the end of the second A, going into the bridge, there's some different stuff happening. So know that in this episode, we're talking about really the first 8 bars and the last 8 bars are really going to work super well with what we're going to talk about today. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to take a peek at your PDF from this week, because what I have is the actual chord changes written out for the A section with the first ending in there and then, sort of what happens at the end. Little bit different, but basically exactly the same. So let's go through that real quick. So the first chord you're going to notice is concert F major 7, which is our home key. All right, so that makes sense. We have a 1 chord right at the beginning. Now, in the second bar, some people play this in different ways. A lot of people will go up and play this diminished passing chord to get to the 2, where they'll play F major 7 for a bar, then they'll play F sharp diminished 7. And that leads us into the G minor 7, right? Then some other people that I've played with a ton, what they'll do is they'll play a 6 chord in the second bar. So they'll play 1, and they'll play some form of a 6, and then they'll go to the 2. Both things are kind of accomplishing the same thing, just in slightly different ways. It's basically trying to lead us to that concert G minor 7 chord, but it's just doing it in 2 different ways at the end of the day. Now, the really cool thing that we'll get into later is that basically what you would play over the F sharp diminished 7 or the D7 can largely be exactly the same thing. But again, we'll get into that later. That's not what we're doing today. I have it notated as a 6 chord, so we'll just say it goes from 1 down to a 6. And then we have 2, which is G minor 7, to 5. Then what we do is we go up to A minor 7, which I would consider a 3 chord. And then we go to D minor 7, which I would consider a 6 chord. And then we go back to a 2, then a 5, and then we're back at the top. So one thing is really, really cool about this, right? Aside from the second measure, everything is 100% diatonic to the key of concert F major. Got a 1 chord, a 2 chord, a 5 chord, a 3 chord, and a 6 chord. And all of those we can just think about in the key of concert F, okay? Now, where a lot of people get hung up is they say in the second bar, I've got to do something that's not diatonic, but you don't have to. And this might seem like, no, blasphemy. What are you talking about? I have to do something different over the second bar. But would it really change approaching this tune if you never played it before? If you just completely ignored the second bar and just played in the key of F? And do you think that it would really ruin it? I don't think so. In fact, here is 2 A sections of me playing strictly and purely diatonically to the key of F major over the entire A section without changing what I'm playing in the second bar. You be the judge. So I don't really think that it ruins the statement to just stay in the key of concert F. Because think about what that chord is too. It's a passing chord to get to another diatonic chord. So really, it's not going to be that offensive. Now, of course, we'll talk about what you could do over that second part if you want to do something. But I want to challenge you this week. I want to challenge you to come up with some really, really good statements over the A sections, just staying in the key of concert F. But let's talk about a couple of considerations that you can make that will take your diatonic solos to the next level. So how many of you have ever studied your diatonic triads or your diatonic seventh chords? So diatonic triads being something like this. Building a triad off of each step of the scale. And then the diatonic seventh chord is just being a natural extension of that. Those are really valuable things to practice for the exact reason that we're going to go over, right? We talked about the fact that besides measure 2, every chord in the A section is diatonic to the key of F. So what I want you to think about at first, step 1, is to go through the A sections and just kind of mess around diatonically in the key of F. That's it. No further thought than that. Just try playing something that sounds halfway decent in the key of F. Once you have done some stuff with that, and you feel pretty good about it, you feel like you have your head wrapped around that key of F as the chord changes are going by. You're staying in that key. You're not playing anything offensive. Now I want you to consider something else. If all the chords are diatonic, one thing that would be really valuable for us to think about is the different shapes, the different triads and chords that exist in concert F. And then thinking about how those line up with the chord changes that are going by, right? So if we were to play a certain shape over concert F, right? So if we were playing concert F major 7 chord, we might play a shape like this, which is just the chord tones to that chord, right? But then when the chord changes to a concert G minor 7 chord, we might start to realize, if we're thinking about it, that it's all those in-between notes that sound the best when that chord is actually happening. Now, we're just talking about chord tones, but if we think about this in the context of everything is in F and we're simply trying to play the shapes that we think sound best, the money notes, quote unquote, we're going to start to play these shapes without having to think chord to chord to chord to chord. So what I want you to do is I want you to largely think about how that scale, that concert F scale, can be expressed in different shapes, right? Even if you were to just take the first diatonic chord and the one a step up from that, you've got most of your bases covered by simply doing that, these two shapes, a concert F major 7 shape and then a concert G minor 7 shape. Everything else is just going to be like a small variation on those two things because we're playing one set of 4 notes and then we're playing all the in-between notes. And hopefully that makes sense. So as you go through and solo over this stuff, just playing in the key of concert F, once you're familiar with the scale, you're doing okay with it. Now I want you to start thinking about what are the complementary shapes that are going on that would sound great over the fact that this harmony is actually moving. Okay. And I think that'll be a good thought just kind of floating around in your head. What I don't want you to do is, I don't necessarily want you to think about each chord happening. When does it start? When does it end? Try to use your intuition a little bit more to start playing some of these really good notes and these really good shapes over the A sections. So what I've done is I've given you, all the Patreon members, I've given you guys trading tracks. So there's a couple of tracks of trading 8s over the A sections only. And then there's going to be one trading track for the $5 members that's going to be trading 4s to go along with that, something a little extra. And then you're also going to get a backing track of just the A sections looped. So you could really go at this. You could really, really experiment with this as much as you possibly can. And that's the name of the game this week is turn on the backing tracks or the trading tracks and get to work, right? It's not really work, it's just playing. But do the playing. And that's the thing that's really going to start to connect you with these A sections. So next week, we'll talk about maybe some things that we can do over that second bar. By then, we should be really, really comfortable just playing in the key of concert F over the A sections. Now, I mentioned that I'm going to give these extra materials to the Patreon members. If you didn't know, that's how this show stays in business, is by support from listeners just like you. We do that through the Patreon platform. It's a very, very small monthly donation. And in return for that, you get materials with every single episode that we put out. There's also a backlog of materials of, all 395 episodes that we have ever done over there. So if you want more information about that, if you want to get the materials that I mentioned so that you can actually practice this with some trading tracks, some backing tracks, go to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, or go to patreon.com and search for the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. As soon as you sign up, you get access to all that stuff, and it's going to be an invaluable resource for you. Quick shout out to our new patrons this week. Thank you to Ryan, Rob, and David for becoming part of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson family. We really appreciate you. And of course, we appreciate all, approaching 400 members that we have over there. We couldn't do the show without you. So again, it's 10minutejazzlesson.com. Click on one of the Patreon banners and get signed up. So looking forward to hearing about your results, and we'll see you next week where we talk about the A sections again, but with a little bit more fanciness and a little bit more consideration for that second bar. Have fun this week. Hope everybody's staying safe and healthy as always. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.